Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. Jesus made the disciples get into a boat and precede him to the other side of the sea, while he dismissed the crowds. After doing so, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. When it was evening, he was there alone. Meanwhile, the boat, already a few miles offshore, was being tossed about by the waves, for the wind was against it. During the fourth watch of the night, he came toward them, walking on the sea. When the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified. "It's a ghost," they said, and they cried out in fear. At once Jesus spoke to them. "Take courage, it is I. Do not be afraid." Peter said to him in reply, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." He said, "Come." Peter got out of the boat and began to walk on the water toward Jesus. But when he saw how strong the wind was, he became frightened. And beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." Immediately Jesus stretched out his hand and caught him, and said to him, "O you of little faith, why did you doubt?" After they got into the boat, the wind died down. Those who were in the boat did him homage, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." After making the crossing, they came to land at Gennesaret. When the men of that place recognized him, they sent word to all the surrounding country. People brought to him all those who were sick, and begged him that they might touch only the tassel of the cloak. And as many as touched it were healed. The Gospel of the Lord. I love this gospel reading. I feel like I can't read it enough because I often need that reminder that the Lord is calling me out into the difficulties, into the challenges that life faces. And I know I'm not alone. It's easy to want to stay on the boat, to be afraid, to be stifled by fear. That keeps us from going out, from living, from risking. But look at this beautiful risk that Peter takes. "Lord, if it's you, call me out to you on the water." And Jesus calls him, just as Jesus calls each of us to leave the boat of our securities, of our comfort, and to go forth and to follow him, to be with him, even in the midst of the storm. And Peter, so long as he had his eyes fixed on Christ, so long as his gaze was on Christ, was able to walk in the midst of the storm, was able to walk on water. But the second that he focused on the wind and the waves and all that was happening around him, the second that he lost focus of Christ, on the one who was sustaining him there in that moment, he began to sink. Now, I recognize that experience of Peter is one that we probably make often. Perhaps we leave that boat. Perhaps we leave our security and certainties and comfort. But then it becomes too much. And we become so focused on all those things that are going on around us, all those things that are swirling around us. And we begin to fear again. And we start to sink. And it seems as if those waves are going to make us drown. But what does Jesus do immediately? He doesn't let Peter sink. The Lord never leaves us to our own devices. He immediately stretches out his hand and pulls him up and saves him. You see, we have nothing to fear. Absolutely nothing to fear. We have no reason to stay on the boat because we know that the Lord desires to be with us, to help us to walk in the midst of the storm, yes, even to walk on water. And we even have nothing to fear when we're out in the midst of the craziness and the hecticness. Because even if we start to fall, even if we lose sight of him, he's going to be there to pick us up. He's going to save us. How much the Lord loves us and desires to stay close to us, even to the point of sustaining us in the midst of our own weakness. The Lord doesn't ask us to do something that he himself does not want to help us to do. He himself wants to be with us. He wants to help us. He wants to aid us. He wants to strengthen us. He wants to journey with us. And so long as we keep our gaze focused on him, there's absolutely nothing to fear, because he's going to sustain us. Perhaps when you go home you could read this gospel again, because as I said, we can't read it enough. We constantly need this reminder, because it's so easy to forget. Because there's so much going on in the world. There's so much going on in our lives. It seems as if everything has gone crazy. We need this reminder. Maybe rip it out of your Magnificat. Tape it up to your mirror, so that when you're getting ready in the morning, we need these reminders. Christ is with us. Christ is with us, and he wants to sustain us. Let us have the courage to call out like Peter to Christ and ask him to call us to himself, even in the midst of the storm. And if we fall, if in the process we begin to sink, we know that he'll be there to save us.